Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mario Palma. I am the Vice President of Multilingual Teaching and Learning. I have the honor and privilege of working with a larger team as part of the American Reading Company. We are being hosted today with Molly Breslin, your local account manager, and she will be monitoring any of the questions that may come up during our conversation today. Please feel free to use the chat box to either comment or pose your questions. And Molly and I are going to try to keep our rhythm succinct so that we're providing content and also acknowledging some of the questions that may come up. Our goal is to spend the next 45 minutes discussing what we are calling the blueprint for biliteracy. And we will leave about 10 to 15 minutes just before 2 o'clock for explicit discussions around your questions. So it is our pleasure to host our webinar today, and thank you so much for joining us. Let's see here. The work that we engage in on a daily basis in support of dual language education is anchored in our relationships with our academic advisory board. Some of these faces might seem familiar to you, others may be new. We are honored and privileged to work primarily with Kathy and Manuel Escamilla out of University of Colorado Boulder. Their work in dual language classrooms informs our professional development and materials every day. The father of language acquisition, if you will, Dr. Jim Cummins out of the University of Toronto is also on our advisory board. And we are honored and privileged to have accepted Ofelia Garcia as our latest member. And so these are just a host of friends who are supporting us in their literacy championships to make sure that we are honoring the methodologies that are authentic that is oftentimes lacking in our dual language classrooms. So we invite their gospel, their research, and their rhetoric into our conversation today. Some of the problems that we'd like to begin our discussion around that we are dedicated to solving primarily in dual language classrooms are listed on the next two slides. So generally, emergent bilinguals disproportionately make up the percentage of students who lack grade level reading proficiency. Often they lack access to engaging in authentic instructional materials. They lack access to a substantial range of level texts that are strategically aligned to their biliteracy goals. They tend to have higher dropout rates from high school. They are reconciling a schooling system that often denies their bilingualism or lacks opportunities to build from their bilingualism that they bring from their bilingual homes. That often comes with low expectations from their academic community and are in need of K-12 Spanish and English instructional systems to be able to provide differentiation and progress monitoring. And also have teachers who are in need of more professional development on how biliteracy is developed through language acquisition. And so these are some of the problems that we would like to anchor our discussion from today. If we look at the three main pillars of dual language education, as noted from the Center for Applied Linguistics, those include bilingualism and biliteracy. So when we discuss bilingualism, we are talking about listening and speaking in at least two languages. When we discuss biliteracy, we are talking about reading and writing in addition to listening and speaking in at least two languages. So that would entail the first pillar. The second pillar, as noted by the Center for Applied Linguistics, refers to academic excellence. And so the idea of being able to show rigorous comprehension and deep cognition in both languages through their bilingualism and their biliteracy. And last but not least, the third pillar, which oftentimes gets overlooked in dual language education, is this idea of social cultural competency. Not just understanding the culture that comes with the language, but being able to understand the cultural nuances that comes with those multiple languages and being able to appreciate the differences between the cultures that come with those two languages. And at the core of it, being able to build relationships with people who are different from themselves. Recently, there's been a fourth pillar added to these initial three pillars of dual language education, as noted by Deborah Palmer, who is a literacy professor out of University of Boulder, Colorado. And in her latest edition of NYSABE, New York State Association for Bilingual Education, Bilingual Times, she talks about the importance of critical consciousness, so making sure that there is equity and social justice embedded in the curriculum and in the instruction anchored in dual language education. If you have any questions about any of these four pillars, please send an email to myself or Molly, and we can definitely provide you with more of the writings from Center for Applied Linguistics or Deborah Palmer. And so we really want to focus today's conversation on the first two pillars, how to develop bilingualism and biliteracy through academic excellence. So our goals in terms of relaying this instructional system lie at the core of determining each student's bilingual independent reading level by beginning with what they can do, their bilingual strengths, and then skills that have yet to be mastered, as indicated by the Common Core State Standards. Our second goal is to then establish effective independent reading routines, routines and procedures that allow teachers to meet one-on-one with their students to focus on bilingual reading skills and metalinguistic awareness. So not just learning how to read and write in English and Spanish, but also understanding and appreciating the relationship between those two languages and finding critical parts of the day during either whole group, small group, or one-to-one instruction to create those connections explicitly with students. So if we're looking at delivering our instruction through rich content, that would be divided between reading and writing under the component of whole class direct instruction and exploration. We would include vocabulary development, key concepts, and critical thinking. And many of these balanced literacy components that you're familiar with are used to support that. So that would include reading, providing read aloud experiences, shared or close reading, independent reading, shared writing, and then eventually independent writing. Today, we're really going to focus on small group instruction, this idea of temporary and flexible groupings, which would include targeted code-based skills, using actual strategies and methodologies anchored in biliteracy, and then culminating in actual texts to make sure that foundational skill instruction is always contextualized. So if we're looking at a coherent instructional biliteracy system, it needs to be anchored in materials that are authentic. And so for many of you who are on the call, the ERLA and the ANIL are familiar tools for you. For others, these may be new tools. So we'll just give a brief explanation of what problems these two tools were designed to solve. So the ERLA and the ANIL perform in the same way in that they are formative assessment tools that are meant to develop teachers in dual language programs, the headset, the kind of expertise in understanding the reading acquisition process in English and Spanish. But what is different about these two different tools from many other tools that are being used in dual language classrooms is that they are not translations of each other. The ERLA and the ANIL were created separately through a rigorous analysis of language arts standards in either English or Spanish, and then were created to provide insight on how to organize books according to their text complexity levels, and then how to identify students' independent reading abilities in either language. There are other tools that try to perform the same way, but because of a lack of authenticity, what we find in Spanish classrooms primarily is that there are English methodologies being used to teach Spanish. And so this is a huge concern for our company, for the partners and the school districts with whom we work, because at the core of dual language education and our fourth pillar, as mentioned before, critical consciousness, part of the social justice that needs to be in our classrooms is that authentic instruction is happening every single day. And so we do not want to teach Spanish using English methodologies unless it is appropriate, unless those methodologies apply to the internal structures of both languages. So with a combination of grade level rigor and differentiated support, we are hoping that accelerated achievement and academic excellence, that second pillar of dual language, will be achieved. And so for many of you who work with the American Reading Company, we know that you cannot just jump right into instruction without having a robust bilingual reading culture. And so making sure that our dual language classrooms are successful really is contingent on the idea that students identify as readers, not just in one language, but in two languages. And so for many of the teachers with whom we work, this has been a challenge because of the status that languages oftentimes have in our classrooms. In many cases, students may have a identity of as a reader in one of the two languages versus both. And so it begs the question of how we can develop reading cultures in bilingual classrooms. So we'll explore that question today together. So at the core of dual language education is this inherent need for teachers to be able to understand what the stages of reading acquisition are in both English and Spanish separately, and then more importantly, what skills are shared across languages. And so we share this image with many of our teachers during professional development sessions, and then also with leadership, principals, assistant principals, and literacy coaches who are supporting dual language programs in their respective schools to give a bird's eye view, essentially, of what the foundational skills are in either of these two languages. And so if you're looking on the left-hand side, you can see the grade levels culminate across the staircase. And in green, you see the basic foundational high leverage skills for Spanish. And then to the right, you see the English foundational skill that would be co-occurring at that particular grade level. So if we were to look at the beginning of kindergarten, the standards demand that students learning in Spanish have the ability to identify at least 70 initial syllables. Sílabas abiertas is what we call them, where you have a consonant and a vowel. But in English, because of the internal structure being quite different, we are expecting just initial consonant sounds to be mastered. And for those of you that have familiarity with those early literacy skills, that is to self-prompt unknown words phonetically using the first sound or the sílaba inicial. And so English and Spanish are quite different in that regard. If we jump up to third grade, you'll notice that there aren't differences between English and Spanish because the internal structures of each language, which are needed to be able to decode words, are already mastered. So students who are bilingual in third grade or above, who are reading on or above grade level, should have already mastered the decoding process in both of those languages. And so English and Spanish actually marry quite well at the third grade and above level, where the heavy lifting is no longer on the sounds of words, but rather on the meanings of words. And so we know that there is a very stringent focus on acquiring as much tier 2 and tier 3 vocabulary and through this identity of readership and word consciousness. So the foundational skills that we're going to go over really are focusing on the K2 spectrum, where English and Spanish are quite different. One document that we often share with teachers as well is to look at, well, what these strategies and skills look like across English and Spanish. So what you're seeing here is what we call a developmental taxonomy of foundational skills, English on the right and Spanish on the left. We organize our reading levels according to colors. And so you'll see uno amarillo, dos amarillo, tres amarillo. And then on the right, 1 yellow, 2 yellow, 3 yellow. And so you'll see that English and Spanish begin very similarly, and that we are talking about active reading strategies, sentence, pattern, and picture reading. But once we jump to the third stage within the yellow reading level, the authenticity factor comes into play, where we are learning open syllables in Spanish versus initial consonants in English. And so every single teacher, regardless of the language zone in which he or she works, needs to know the acquisition process authentically in both of the languages. Right now, I am at a school in Boston, and we just had a grade group meeting yesterday. And the core of our conversation really entails that the English teacher has just as much responsibility of knowing the Spanish language reading acquisition process as does the Spanish teacher. So there really is a co-nature to this relationship, a co-teaching relationship that we expect in dual language classrooms. Just one quick example of the differences between Spanish and English. We know that Spanish is a transparent language versus English, which we regard as opaque. And what we mean by that is that for every letter, every symbol in either language, in Spanish, there is only one corresponding sound, versus in English, there are multiple sounds that the letters will make depending on where their placement is in the word. And so the unit of study in Spanish would be the sílaba, versus the unit of study in English would be the onset and rhyme. And so these are examples of what our materials are based on to make sure that they are as authentic as possible. Some major areas that you will see lessons in the foundational skills toolkits focus on have much to do with comprehension, accuracy and fluency, phonics, vocabulary and language, oracy, and reading identity. And last but not least, range of reading. So being able to read across genres and understand how different genres operate. Really, the goal of our materials is to make sure that the teacher is not the only one that is that owns the expertise, but that there's this apprenticeship model, so that teachers are teaching students how to be able to navigate their own goals. And that starts with the oracy factor, being able to actually say what my goal is, so that way I'm applying that goal as I read. So if we were to speak to any student in a dual language classroom, and we would ask them, ¿Cuál es tu meta con poder? What are you working on when you read in Spanish? These are some examples of what they might say. As we go through this instructional system, we do want to remind you that we have an online progress monitoring tool called School Pace, which is very nicely organized to support dual language classrooms, in that you can see every single student in each classroom with their English and Spanish level, and then also their engagement level in the language that they are learning to read in. So it's very important that each teacher in a dual language program know the reading levels in English and Spanish, the reading goal in both of those languages, and then the level of engagement that the student has in both of those languages. And so School Pace can house all of that information in one neat package. Eventually, after all students are leveled and have their goals identified, is when strategic grouping would occur. And so I know Isabela, Camilo, and Jose are all working on accuracy and comprehension. I would then use the lessons in the foundational skills toolkits, which we will go over in just a little bit, to be able to choose the right lesson that matches up with their goal that was identified through the leveling process. So if we are anchoring our knowledge in terms of Richard Allington's research, one of our advisory board members, we would discuss the principles of RTI, really. So matching reader and text level is really at the core of what we do, dramatically expanding reading activity, and then this idea of using very small groups or tutoring. This is particularly important for middle and high school teachers, who often have many different sections, up to at least 150 to 200 kids in a dual language program, who they are responsible for developing their bilingualism and biliteracy for. What kind of structures can we create in a middle and high school classroom so that teachers get to know who their students are, and then also have enough time to meet with them periodically to be able to teach them the skills that they need and keep up with the rate of their progress. So the one-to-one leveling process would happen at the beginning of the year, but all groupings, all meetings with students from that point on would happen in strategic small groups. Richard Allington would suggest that no more than 4 to 5 students be in the same group at any given time. So for those of you that are not familiar with the ENIL or the ERLA, it is our leveling system for books and for students. To be able to locate where the student is at in terms of this continuum, to find that initial reading level, to match students with appropriate books using the ENIL, to be able to identify which skills the student already has, both foundational and comprehension based, and then to develop lessons and strategic groupings around the skills that are missing for that student to be able to progress towards grade level and beyond. And so we start with a screener based on their phonics and vocabulary knowledge. We then go into diagnostic using comprehension and a cold read. And then from that point on, we progress monitor for the rest of the year. So if we were to look at the skills in English, we would see the sequence from kindergarten all the way up to second grade that really depends on which reading level you're at, is what I would then focus on next. So the leveling process is probably one of the most important processes that we would initiate to be able to locate what skills lie in a student's zone of proximal development. Often what we see happening in classrooms in dual language programs is that there's lots of grade level instruction going on, but then there's lots of support needed for how to differentiate with students who are reading below grade level. So we need to start with what they can do and then figure out what they need next. So if we're looking at the same sequence, you see how it's very different in Spanish because of the different structure, the different internal structure of the language. So how do we create these small groups, these strategy groups, right? What does that process look like? Well, we begin with leveling. The leveling process will help you understand which common core foundational skills and comprehension skills each student already has. Then through that leveling process, you identify which skills are missing. And then because of the robust nature of the lessons that have been included in the foundational skills toolkits in English and Spanish, you can then choose a lesson that corresponds with the skills that have yet to be mastered. So this is really a cyclical process that begins with leveling and then goes through the lessons as students are progressing through each of the color levels. So for example, if a student was able to decode one-syllable words and is able to use their knowledge of high-frequency words to then add additional sounds to create longer one-syllable words, that would be the independent skill that the student has. But there might be other word families that are missing from that particular student's repertoire. So instead of a student just staying in what we call zone one, which would be using my power words or my sight words to create additional words. For example, if I put the phoneme S or the sound S in front of it then becomes sit, that is a skill that the student already has. What about replacing the first sound of a power word with another? That would be a different zone of difficulty. So the lesson that I choose would be from zone 2. So for those of you that are familiar with the EARL and the ANIL, you know that it is that specific. The lessons that we have are that specific to the student's needs. So I'm just going to go through a couple of the components of a particular lesson, and then I'll check in about questions or comments because I see the chat box is on fire right now. So each of the lessons in the foundational skills toolkits will start with a goal that the teacher will present to the students to make sure that they understand what they're expected to do by the end of the lesson. There is always a gradual release model embedded in the lesson so that the teacher does show his or her expertise in relationship to the goal. We then engage in guided practice, which is ideally hitting the student's zone of proximal development. The herramientas or the foundational skills toolkits is a kind of a pyramid student-facing and teacher-facing tool. So what you're looking at here would be what the teacher is reading or looking at. And then here on the bottom right, you see what the students are looking at that directly corresponds with the guided practice portion of the lesson. That then culminates with, in this case, it would be some phonological awareness, kinesthetic work, and then continuing with additional manipulatives as needed. So there is a pretty general cadence to any particular lesson that does follow the gradual release model. So I'm going to stop here. This is our what you get slide, and I'm just going to check in with some of our comments. Okay, so it looks like there are some friends who would like a copy of the PowerPoint. That is definitely something we can provide. Any of the tools that I shared can be presented in PDF form, so we can definitely do that. We are recording the webinar. I will leave that up to Molly to determine if we can send that out. And it looks like that seems to be all, if not most, of the comments.
Mario, there was just one quick another question about the staircase that you shared at the stages of reading acquisition at the beginning,
Yeah.
um, where they can access that. And anybody who's interested in that can contact me after. It is in the Anil. If you are a school or someone who is using the Anil, it is in one of the front pages, and you also can access it from our website. But feel free to contact me directly, and we can discuss that further.
One thing to add to what Molly just said is that I believe the staircase that we use in this webinar is modified and that it shows the acquisition of both languages versus the Anil and Erla may have the staircase only in the language that the tool represents. So what I'm assuming is that many of our participants might want a bilingual reading taxonomy, which we can definitely provide you. So in terms of what the materials entail, you are seeing three separate packages that can either be purchased independently or in conjunction. So we do provide an entire K2 foundational skills toolkit in English, or herramientas para las destrezas fundamentales in Spanish. Or if you are a sixth grade teacher who doesn't have students that are reading below second grade, you wouldn't need the entire package. You may just want to buy the red level foundational skills. So these can be purchased a la carte, or they can be acquired in their entirety because they do represent the K2 continuum. And so every single package, color level, does include lo que decimos en español, un marco de la maestra, or framework. There are 3 frameworks for the kindergarten level toolkits. There are 2 frameworks for the first grade, and then 2 frameworks for the second grade. Notice how there are many more manipulatives at the kindergarten level, just because of the amount of phonics, phonemic awareness, phonological awareness, and acquisition of those early reading skills that exist at that particular level. So if at any point you're wondering what skills are represented, they're listed here under the skills taught, just to kind of anchor what these materials are being used for. So we do have palabras de uso frecuente cards, we have tarjetas de las sílabas, we have actividades y jueguitos that the kids can use to be able to acquire those early foundational skills. But what we do want to stress is that the foundational skills toolkits emphasize contextualized application. And so although you may see all of these materials, these manipulatives, really the core of the foundational toolkits are the lessons and then how they culminate in application to real books. We are a very proud company that says we are anti-worksheet. We are against decontextualized approaches to phonics. We believe in the power of independent and buddy reading and want to amplify dramatically the amount of reading that occurs in classrooms. And so a significant gap in what we're seeing is that students are receiving guided reading instruction, but then often do not apply that skill to their independent practice. So for teachers who are on this webinar, I'm curious, how are we making sure that what we're teaching is actually getting practiced? Often a teacher, very well-meaning teacher, will collect the guided reading books back from the students with whom she worked and does not provide any type of guidance about what to do now. So we literally spend 15 minutes gradually releasing the responsibility around a very important skill. The guided reading session is over. What next? What happens between the first guided reading lesson and the next one, possibly a few days, if not a week from now? All of that practice, independent practice time, is being lost unless the students are being guided about how to practice that skill with additional materials from the independent library, for example. So we do want to stress that there needs to be independent practice occurring just as much as any guided reading or small group instructional system. And so we'll move on to the next slide, if I can get this together. Kind of went over that system. So we know that the levels are initiated with a screener. And so in English and Spanish, we both have a phonics screener. You're looking at an example of a Spanish phonics screener because it's very important that I locate where on this phonics infrastructure a student is in Spanish. And so you'll see that the initial reading levels from the beginning of kindergarten all the way to the end of second grade represent the amount of complexity that a word has in Spanish. For those of you that are Spanish teachers, you know that because there is only one sound per letter, words tend to be a lot longer in Spanish, and that the acento is a student's best friend. With or without an acento, the meaning of the word completely changes. So the length of words becomes increasingly more difficult, and then also the placement of the acento can literally make or break comprehension. So the screener is crucial in understanding where a student is at in terms of that taxonomy. That then culminates into a diagnostic, right? So I use the screener to then choose where in the anil or in the ERLA, in this case, we're looking at the anil, I can drill a little bit closer, a little bit more specific as far as what the phonics abilities are for that student. So if this were my student's page from their control de sílabas cerradas, or in this case, closed syllables, which would be a CVC structure, I'm seeing that there are many words with inflectional S or R that the student is able to identify, but there are also some words with inflectional N, or words that have a CV, CCV structure to them have yet to be mastered. So that would then tell me which lesson I need to find in the corresponding ANIL toolkit. And so the system, even though we're looking at an example in Spanish, works exactly the same way in English, where I would then choose a lesson from the herramientas. This is what the teacher is looking at. This is what the student is looking at. And ideally, I'm choosing the lesson that pertains to the gap that the student showed during the leveling process. So all of the lessons in the toolkits are based on the skills that are needed for those K2 foundational skills. It's not just decoding in nature. There are also lessons that correspond to the comprehension goals as well. So you may see lessons that really focus on fluency and comprehension. You might also see a focus on metalinguistic awareness that is embedded in our lessons. Again, to teach to the bilingual cohort of students that are in our dual language classrooms. What kind of metalinguistic awareness are we supporting students through in these lessons as well? So reading with comprehension really is the ultimate goal. So although there may be lessons that focus on chunking or phonics, the student at the end of the day needs to know that comprehension and the process of making meaning really is the ultimate goal of being bilingual and biliterate. So in order to provide that contextualized experience, the foundational skills toolkits will include sets of guided reading books. So 6 copies of the same book. There are pages that should be copied for students to refer to. In this example, you see estrategias para leer comprendiendo. So this is what the students would be looking at. If I were the teacher teaching this lesson, I would definitely have my books prepared. I would have read the lesson. I would be very familiar with the book and the content of it. I would have my data to back up why these students are in the same group. And I would have photocopied these strategies so that students are held accountable for using them beyond the 4 walls of my small group. Because again, we need to make sure that there is independent practice happening after the lesson is done. So the next set of slides are really about the different reading levels, which we really don't have time to get into. So I'm just going to scroll through here so you can just see how the lessons become increasingly more difficult, representing the level of complexity that each of the color levels in the ANIL and in the ERLA have. Right? So you can see that by second grade, the complexity of words are quite profound, and that eventually we move towards reading series books where there are many different series, many different books around the same character, because we're moving more towards comprehension. So this set of tools has really helped the teachers with whom we work, being able to provide strategic instruction around what we find is the biggest gap in terms of our dual language classrooms in Spanish particularly. There are also concerns in English that, as well, is that there is a large gap of foundational skills. Students have huge gaps in terms of the foundational skills, knowledge, and how the languages work internally. Again, so just to bring up just a point that we had before, how am I using real-time data to create strategic groupings? How am I then choosing the right lessons based on the power goal or meta con poder that my students are in need of? And then how are those groups changing based on the students that don't need that skill anymore? So just to reiterate, the groups are strategic, they're temporary and flexible. Students should not be in the same guided reading group for more than a few days, maybe a week or so at a time. Because they are all learning those skills at different rates, your groups need to reflect those differences. So I'm going to end here with three articles that we use in our professional development sessions. The first one is entitled Reading Time with Goals in Mind, What the Research Says by Jennifer Saravallo, a researcher that many of you might be familiar with, followed by Every Child Every Day by Dr. Richard Allington, talking about the tenets of literacy education, and then really understanding what some of the problems that leadership in dual language bilingual education are facing. One of which is this need for authentic instructional materials. If you need a copy of any of these articles, we can definitely send those out as well. My suggested reading to really anchor the content of our webinar today. We also provide professional development for those of you that have not taken advantage of that. So if you have any questions about professional development, please contact Molly, your local ARC representative, and we will end with our information. So I'm going to open it up to the group. We have about 8 minutes left. And hopefully I was able to have a pace that wasn't too overwhelming. Any questions that anyone has, I'd be more than happy to answer at this point.
Mario, have you unmuted everybody?
Let me see.
They have a question. They should put it in the chat box.
I think they should put it in the chat box. I'll try to unmute. Let's see. So unmute. There we go. I think people should be able to talk now. Can our friends hear each other? Can you guys speak?
I think they have to go and click mute on the.
Oh, they have to click on mute. Okay, well, if you want to chat or if you want to talk, you'd have to, let me unmute everyone. There we go.
You on mute?
All right, you're good.
Okay, I hear everyone. Does anybody have any questions?
There was a question in the chat box regarding, can you go back to the slide with the articles?
Sure.
The type of the Reading Times article from.
Yeah, here we go.
TV.
So the three articles here, the first one is Reading Time with Goals in Mind by Jennifer Saravallo. And it's in a previous educational leadership magazine edition. And it talks about the importance of establishing goals and that students, in order to be provided the independence and power, the agency that we oftentimes wish they had, it starts with being very clear about which goals they're expected to achieve. And so the ERLA and the ANILA are designed to provide that. The second article really talks to the tenets of literacy, basic literacy instruction, and how there is a need for dramatic amounts of independent reading, again, to balance out the amount of instruction that is happening with actual practice time. There should be equal amounts of both occurring. And then probably one of my favorite articles is on the right-hand side from the National Dual Language Forum from the Center for Applied Linguistics, authored by Dr. Kate Mencken, who works very closely with Dr. Ofelia Garcia. She's identified some of the challenges, some of the problems in terms of social justice, materials, teacher allocation, problems that leadership groups, leadership teams that are running dual language programs in schools are facing and how to meet those challenges head on. So depending on if you're a teacher, a parent, or a leader, a lot of these articles have definite relevance with dual language education. Any other questions before we wrap up? I'm wondering if I can show a video. Let's see here. This is me. Let's see. Who else can get on camera? Let's see who's bold. I'm wondering if I play a video, if you guys will be able to see it. There is a video that I wanted to share, but I'm not sure if you guys can actually see it here.
Después del año 1800.
Hey, Geronimo.
Hey, Mr. Mario.
How you doing? Thanks for helping us today. So we heard that you're doing lots of great things as a reader. And I heard that you were bilingual as well.
Yes.
What languages do you speak?
English and Spanish, but like mostly Spanish in my house.
Can you guys hear that? And who do you speak with in Spanish in your house? Okay.
My mom, but mostly in English with my brother.
With your brother. So with your brother, you practice mostly in English, and with your mom, mostly in Spanish.
Yeah, because she doesn't know English.
Oh, yeah. So, but it's cool to be bilingual, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So you're able to communicate with a lot of different people, it sounds like.
Yes.
Yeah. Have you practiced learning how to read in English and Spanish?
Yes.
Yep. Can we learn a little bit from you today?
Yes.
What language would you like to practice in first?
Whatever is the hardest one.
Well, you choose. What do you think is harder for you?
Spanish.
Spanish. So you like a challenge, I guess, huh?
Yes.
All right. So we're going to start first by reading a few words. And as we're looking at this, I'd like to first get to know you as a reader. So what kind of interest do you have?
Fiction.
So you like to read fiction?
Yes.
Tell me a little bit more about that. Why do you like to read fiction?
Because it's like more interesting to me, like because I don't have to like it's with a J.
With a J?
Yes.
There you go.
And because I don't know, like I get more interested in fiction than like nonfiction because
Yeah, I like to read fiction because the characters. I was about to say personajes. Sometimes I think in Spanish too. The characters help me learn different ways to solve problems. One of the cool things about fiction books. Yeah. So there are going to be a lot of fiction options that you can choose from when we're reading together.
Okay.
So intentamos cómo leer algunas palabras primero en español. Okay. Quiero que me leas las palabras que están en las cajas grises de izquierda a la derecha. Empieza cuando estás listo.
ama, amo, mamá, llama, yema, amor, alma, clima, palmas, plumas, problema, llamando, palmada, diadema, camiseta, asamblea, salamandra, ánimo, almohada, sumábamos, desanimado, enamorados, exclamación, amablemente, emocionante, amarillendo, reclamándonos, próximamente, auménteselo y ahogue. No lo sé ahora.
No rendiste. Aunque se hizo un poquito más difíciles las palabras, no rendiste, no te rendiste. Empezamos con esta columna que trabaja un poco diferente. Quiero que elijas 3 palabras y me enseñas el significado, la definición o otra palabra que tiene casi la misma definición, que sería un sinónimo. Ok, empieza por favor.
Desanimado es cuando uno no quiere hacer algo, por ejemplo, uno está enfermo y le dicen a uno que si uno quiere ir al parque y uno le dice, no, estoy desanimado, es que no quiere.
No quieres hacer algo.
Sí.
Muy bien, elige otra palabra.
Endurecer es cuando uno hace algo más Duro. Es cuando uno, digamos que uno se toma algo, ¿cierto? Y uno le pone una roca. Entonces endurece.
Tercera palabra.
¿Señor?
O elige otra palabra.
Mediano, que no es ni tan chiquito ni tan grande.
Muy
Está
bien.
entre los dos.
Ahora me toca a mí. Sencillo.
No, ¿ya digo yo?
Sí.
Sencillo es cuando no es ni por ejemplo, horrible ni asombroso. Es en la mitad. Sencillo, como por ejemplo, como una boda. Uno no hace que el DJ, que todo eso, solo es normal así con el piano y todo eso.
Algo sencillo no
No es perfecto.
es perfecto. Aclarar.
Aclarar es cuando uno le dice, por ejemplo, uno hace algo malo y uno le dice, le voy a aclarar una cosa y le dice lo que hizo mal.
Aclarar es...
Decir algo que uno hizo o sí.
Ok, otra más. Investigar.
Investigar es uno tratar de encontrar algo. Es bueno, o no algo, encontrar like el message de una story. Por ejemplo, cuando uno lee una historia, le pregunta cuál es el message y uno lo investiga para saber cuál es.
Ok, so encontrar.
Sí,
Okay.
encontrar.
Sí, seguimos con la próxima columna. Elige 3 palabras cuando estás listo.
Replicar, cuando uno hace una cosa en 2 o más.
Siguiente.
Irregular, que no es normal. No es por ejemplo, hay personas que son, por ejemplo, uno no le gusta, alguien se está tomando una sopa de rocas, entonces uno le dice, usted eso tan irregular.
Tomarse una sopa de rocas sería
Sí.
no normal, irregular. Okay. Siguiente.
Confesar, cuando uno dice algo, por ejemplo, uno otra vez hizo algo malo y uno le confiesa, por ejemplo, yo hago malo y le digo a mi mamá la verdad.
Ah, ok. Ahora me toca a mí. Ensimismado.
Es que nunca he escuchado esa palabra.
Ah, es nuevo, es una palabra nueva para ti. Ok. Y pálido.
Pálido es cuando uno parece enfermo y uno se cambia como el color.
Color. Abandono.
Abandono es cuando uno deja un objeto o una persona solo en una parte.
Boquiabierto.
Cuando uno, por ejemplo, le hacen una boda a uno muy buena y uno queda así.
Ah. Seguimos con anaranjado.
Universal, cuando es como un cosa, digamos que es un shape,
Una forma.
una forma, y es universal, como muchas partes.
Como de otras partes. Como o similar a otras.
O como los perros calientes, son de universal, en muchas partes los comen.
Ok. Siguiente.
Beneficioso.
Ok.
Que uno ayuda a algo, como por ejemplo, uno dice, esta persona tan beneficiosa, ellos, es buena, unas cosas buenas que son beneficios.
So, si algo te beneficia.
Es algo bueno.
Algo bueno. Okay. Siguiente.
Admirable, cuando, por ejemplo, digamos que hay un niño que es muy bueno, uno lo admira porque él es muy bueno, entonces admirable es cuando hay una persona que es muy buena y hay muchas personas que lo deberían de ver. Si ellos son malos, tendrían que ser como él.
Tienen que ser como él.
Sí.
Me toca. Disminuir.
disminuir. He escuchado la palabra y eh,
Se la he escuchado, pero...
es cuando, por ejemplo, uno baja más cosas. Por ejemplo, yo estuviera en un nivel negro y lo disminuiría a uno blanco.
Ok, eso tiene conocimiento de los colores, del enil y del irla. A ver, habitar.
Habitar habitar.
Son un poquito difíciles estas palabras, ¿verdad? ¿Sabes algo? Lo bueno es que tenemos bastante tiempo para aprenderlas. ¿Qué tal si leemos un libro juntos?
Bueno, señor.
Sí, puedes elegir el libro que quieras. A ver, hay dos opciones. Aquí hay un libro que se llama Cuentos para chicos y grandes y este que se llama Dinero. Pasa la página al libro que quieres leer. Okay, muy bien. Okay, las preguntas que te voy a hacer después de haber leído el libro es, dime 3 cosas que la gente hacían para obtener lo que necesitaban antes de que existiera el dinero. Y después, ¿qué tienen en común el dinero de hoy y los objetos que se usaron en el pasado para el comercio? ¿Vale? ¿Cuándo estás listo?
Ya.
Sí.
Hace mucho tiempo no existía el dinero. Las personas no lo necesitaban. Para obtener alimento, cultivaban, recolectaban o cazaban. Construían sus propias viviendas y fabricaban su ropa. A veces algunas personas tenían objetos que otros querían. Alguien que fabricaba vasijas tal vez quería la canasta que fabricaba otra persona. Así hacían trueques o intercambios entre ellos. Los indígenas norteamericanos comerciaban entre ellos por todo el continente. Intercambian ideas, experiencias y bienes. El trueque funcionaba bien en la mayoría de las circunstancias, pero a veces no se podía determinar qué era lo justo. El trueque funcionaba bien en la mayoría de las circunstancias, pero a veces no se podía determinar qué era lo justo. Entonces se comenzaron a intercambiar objetos que tenían valor por todas las personas. Por esa razón se usaron sal, granos, plumas, hojas de té, ostras, cuentas e incluso anzuelos del mismo modo en que se usa el dinero en la actualidad.
Excelente, muchísimas gracias. Dime 3 cosas que la gente hacían para obtener lo que necesitaban antes de que existiera el dinero.
Lo hacían esas personas.
¿Cómo?
¿Lo hacían?
Cuéntame más sobre eso.
Ellos intercambiaban las cosas que valían mucho para las cosas que ellos necesitaban.
¿Otra cosa más que aprendiste?
Ellos pasaban sal, granos y... ¿cuál era el otro? Sal, granos y plumas.
Veo que volviste a leer para buscar más datos en la lectura, en el texto. ¿Qué tienen en común el dinero de hoy y los objetos que se usaron en el pasado para el comercio?
Uno intercambiaba las cosas para conseguir otra. Por ejemplo, uno va a comprar un galón de leche, uno tiene que dar algo por eso, que son los dólares. Y ellos antes tenían que cambiar algo valioso por algo que ellos necesitaban.
Vale. ¿Y qué palabra puedes usar en lugar de recolectaban sin cambiar el significado del texto?
Señor.
La palabra recolectaban. Aquí. Si reemplazas esta palabra con otra sin cambiar el significado, ¿qué palabra puedes utilizar?
Recoger.
Recoger.
¿Más?
Muy bien.
No, solo estaba preguntando que sea.
¿Hay otra palabra nueva para ti?
en el texto?
¿Trueques?
¿Qué crees que significa trueques?
No tengo idea.
¿Y qué es lo que un lector puede hacer cuando hay un vocabulario?
Leer al lado del texto.
Vale.
Intercambios.
Puede ser. ¿Qué te hizo pensar eso?
Porque por acá hay intercambios o algo de cambiar algo.
Muy bien, aquí el autor está utilizando dos palabras. Dice así hacían trueques o intercambios. Choca.
So that gives us an example of what we would see during the leveling process. And what eventually would happen after that is the teacher would then find a lesson that corresponds with what the student actually needs. So in this particular case, we saw a student that showed un dominio, a mastery of some of those concepts, those foundational skills. So in this case, we would probably look for a level that is a bit higher. So what I would probably use for this particular student would be our toolkits that are actually above second grade level, which we also do have. So although our webinar didn't discuss the foundational skills toolkits or the toolkits above second grade, if you do have a need to support vocabulary acquisition, genre expansion, critical thinking and comprehension, we do have toolkits that are available for that as well. So that would be above the second grade level that we have initiated our conversation around. Once again, we just want to thank you for your time. We do want to encourage you to keep in contact with us. I'm putting up Molly and I's information. So if you do have foundational skill needs, a biliteracy system for differentiation in your dual language program, in your classrooms, we would be more than willing to meet with you to possibly conduct a demonstration on how to level, one very similar to what you saw in the video with our friend Jeronimo. And if you are in need for skills above second grade, we have toolkits that are available in English that support vocabulary acquisition, genre expansion, and critical thinking. Our Spanish instructional team is also developing third through sixth grade toolkits. We are focusing on Blanco, which would be the skills needed for third grade reading in Spanish, and those are soon to come. So whatever your dual language needs are as you become the blueprint for biliteracy, we are always available to answer any and all of your questions and meet with you, hopefully to develop a partnership. So we just want to say thank you for your time, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, Mario, and thank you to all the participants.
Bye-bye. Take care.